T.Y. Hilton has been doubted a lot of times by a lot of people for a lot of things. Just look at his scouting reports coming out of college. This one from NFL.com says that he's undersized and is not a reliable short or intermediate throwing option. But worse than that one is this scouting report from an old website I found. It was probably just wrote by some regular guy and not a pro scout, so I'm not going to hate on the person who wrote this. It's just funny how wrong whoever wrote this was. Saying he is too small and lacks strength against bigger corners, has problems getting off against press coverage, has below average hands, doesn't do a good job catching with his hands extended, also knocks him for playing in a weak conference at a school like FIU, and said that TY has durability concerns. Not only were all of those things proven wrong within the first 2 years of T.Y. Hilton's NFL career, the worst take of them all is when the scouting report says, "not #1 receiver material." If I had to pick one game to show you just how terribly wrong that scouting report was, it would probably be Week 5 of the 2013 season. The Colts were getting ready to play against the Seattle Seahawks. T.Y. Hilton, who scouts have said is too small to beat big physical corners, is about to play against the Legion of Boom, possibly the hardest hitting secondary that has ever been assembled in NFL history. So how did T.Y. Hilton do against them? 5 receptions for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was the best game he had ever had up to that point in his very young career, and is still considered one of the best games he's ever had. Let me just take you through one play. T.Y. is being guarded by Richard Sherman, widely considered to be the best cornerback in the NFL at the time. By the time his career is finished, he will rack up 5 Pro Bowl selections, 3 first-team All-Pro selections, and have 37 career interceptions. He also stands at 6'3" and is a big physical corner. The safety who has eyes on T.Y. is Cam Chancellor. Cam is also 6'3", but is even bigger than Sherman and possibly more physical. With 4 Pro Bowl selections and 2 second-team All-Pro selections, he's another superstar in the Seahawks DB room. Both of these guys are players who should be able to out-physical T.Y. Hilton. It shouldn't even be a discussion that they would get beat by some 5'9" dude out of FIU. But T.Y. doesn't care. He immediately runs through both Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor's zone and freezes them. Richard Sherman doesn't even have a chance. His 5 to 6 yard cushion was ate up in seconds. Earl Thomas does have the angle and can make a touchdown-saving tackle. He's another star for the Seahawks and probably a future Hall of Famer in the midst of a season where he would end the year with over 100 tackles and finish 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting. But that doesn't matter. T.Y. hits the brakes and forces Earl Thomas to overshoot him. T.Y. then runs it in for a touchdown. You can see Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas arguing with each other after the play, trying to make sense of how this undersized second-year wide receiver out of FIU just embarrassed them. What you're about to realize is that you can't make sense of it. They are 2 of the best players at their position in the NFL, and there is nothing they can do to stop T.Y. Hilton. This ability to freeze defenders and get wide open is why head coach Chuck Pagano started calling T.Y. Hilton the Ghost, a nickname that stuck with him for the rest of his career. But how did fans feel when they first heard this nickname? Even T.Y. Hilton's nickname was doubted before it eventually became great. It's just in his DNA to be an underdog at all times. Even when T.Y. Hilton led the NFL in receiving yards, he was an underdog. T.Y. also has the dubious honor of being just one of 4 other players to not be named an All-Pro after leading the NFL in receiving yards. Those 4 other players were Torrey Holt in 2000, who was also not named a second-team All-Pro, but would later get his first-team All-Pro selection in 2003. Also, the notoriously underrated Reggie Wayne is another member of this club in his 2005 season. He would also get his first-team All-Pro selection later in his career thanks to his 2010 season. Then you have Brandon Lloyd, who would only play 3 more seasons in the NFL after his amazing 2010 season. much more of a one-year wonder than T.Y. Hilton. And finally, in 2017, Julio Jones weirdly was not named a first-team All-Pro. He had already been named a first-team All-Pro 2 other times and was a second-team All-Pro for his 2017 season. T.Y. and Brandon Lloyd are the only guys on this list to have never made an All-Pro team at some point. And T.Y. is the only one on this list to have multiple Pro Bowl seasons after and still never get named to an All-Pro team. All of these guys at some point were given the respect they deserved, except for T.Y. Hilton. You could argue that Julio Jones deserved his All-Pro selection that year more because he played 2 less games. But what about in 2018 when T.Y. Hilton only played 14 games and had 1,270 yards but was not named to the Pro Bowl? In my opinion, T.Y. deserved to be an All-Pro for his 2016 season. Another great example of T.Y. Hilton's dominance is how he would transform into the best wide receiver in football just because the Colts were playing against the Houston Texans. Why the Texans? Who knows? He has no connections to Texas that I can find. T.Y. Hilton just tortures them for his own amusement. His numbers against Houston are just insane. 103 catches for 1,820 yards with 11 touchdowns in 20 games. That's 18.2 yards per catch and 91 yards per game. Even in his later years when T.Y. was having injury problems and was trending downwards statistically, he would still almost always put up great numbers against the Texans. His last 100-yard game of his career was Week 13 of the 2020 season at Houston for 110 yards with a touchdown. In 2021, a season where T.Y. played just 10 games, his best game was an 80-yard 4-reception game against Houston. It didn't matter the circumstances, it didn't matter who was defending him. T.Y. Hilton torched the Texans. One of his most iconic games ever was against the Houston Texans, the infamous clown mask game. T.Y. Hilton wore a clown mask to a game in Houston after Texans corner Jonathan Joseph called him a clown. T.Y. would go on to have 85 receiving yards and help the Colts win. I've talked a lot in this video about people who don't really like T.Y. Hilton all that much. So let's finally talk about the people who do. Indianapolis Colts fans. They proved this during the 2021 offseason. T.Y. Hilton's 5-year contract that he signed in 2015 was up, and he was a free agent. Lots of rumors were going around that T.Y. would sign somewhere outside of Indy, like maybe Baltimore. But Colts fans started the hashtag #BringTY_Home to get the attention of the Colts front office and show them that we wanted T.Y. back. They would end up bringing T.Y. back for one final year in 2021. T.Y. Hilton later said that he did see this movement on Twitter, and it did influence his decision to come back to Indy.
4 hours. Is that something you see, and does that play any sort of factor into your decision?
Oh, absolutely. That played a big factor, man. I mean, just seeing it, seeing the song, seeing the tweets. I mean, it was awesome, man. I listened to every last one of them, man. It just was incredible. The love that this city has for me, man. It definitely touched me in a major way.
At the time, we didn't know for sure that it was his last season wearing the horseshoe, but it was kind of assumed that his career was coming to an end. He would later play with the Cowboys in 2022, but I choose not to acknowledge that that ever happened. T.Y. Hilton is an Indianapolis Colt, and nothing will ever change that. He was a special player to watch. He showed up on game day ready to give it everything he had. He stepped up in the big games too. In 9 playoff games with the Colts, T.Y. had 781 yards and 3 touchdowns. If he played a full 17-game season on that pace, he would have 1,476 yards with 6 touchdowns. That's more yards than his 2016 season when he led the NFL in receiving yards. Sadly, T.Y. was stuck on some pretty bad Colts teams, but his excellence will never go unnoticed by Colts fans. Personally, T.Y. Hilton was the reason that I started playing football. As a Colts fan, he was a guy that you could always count on no matter how bad things seemed to be going. He embraced the city of Indianapolis and will always be a legend here. I personally wanted to make this video because T.Y. Hilton was my favorite player for a long time, and like I said, he's the reason that I started playing football. And I just know he was a big inspiration to a lot of other people. I mean, he came in, a lot of people doubted him. At every point in his career, someone said that he couldn't do something or he wasn't good enough for something, and then he would just go out there and prove everybody wrong. And it was a great thing to see every Sunday. And it didn't matter how meaningless the game seemed to be. The Colts were terrible some seasons, like 2017. They were terrible. And it didn't matter. T.Y. Hilton still went out there and he still put out the best performance that he could possibly give. And to me, that means a lot. Because if you go out there and you play like that, when you know in the end of the season, like, you're not going to go to the playoffs, you're just tanking to get a better draft pick. This game probably isn't going to get noticed. This season's going to be forgotten, all this, all that. But you still go out there and you perform amazingly and you give it everything you've got. That, to me, is worth remembering, no matter how bad the season was. Because if you go out there and you give it your all when seemingly nobody's watching, you deserve to be acknowledged, especially once your team starts doing good again. Now, sadly, injuries did get to T.Y. I really wish that he could have been on some better Colts teams, but he definitely deserves to be remembered forever by Colts fans for what he's done for this franchise. Anyways, I'm Limitless Polls. I'll see you guys next time.
What you get mix right, nigga, put it in the blender. Hell yeah, I'm Wingstop. Jump on the chicken tender. It's like the beef with energy and water like timber. Ain't turning, looking like dinner. It's like I got the bag, boy or girl.